Hello, friends of YouTube. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to do chapter 8 and 9, and I'm streaming on Facebook as well. So if you're interested in those kind of things, you can join me live on Facebook. Look up Niphawk there. You should see me there, or Brother Chapin Walton as well. Last week I didn't catch up with the holiday, so I wanted to catch up and do some chapter 8 and chapter 9 today and go through Maccabees, which, if you don't know, is in the Apocrypha, and I've got it in my NRSV with the Apocrypha. It was another inspired Christian book, or not Sam, which were the Christians back then, before we went with the name Christians, which, to my understanding and what some of the word study, that was actually a name they used to say against the Christians and tell them other things there. Sorry, my face itched. And I'll start off here saying, Dear God, prayer here. May this word bless people. May they come closer to knowing you. May questions that come up that inspire and help people to understand come up, so we can get the word out, so we can inspire your truth. May the people who watch this be blessed and be able to follow you and do the righteous things in your name. May they be forgiven and give forgiveness as you would want them to. Give them their daily bread and help them through their days. And bless us with this word. Amen. Okay, and then first, Maccabees 8. This is the alliance with Rome. I haven't read completely through Maccabees. I'm wondering if this is how the Roman Empire gets started and what ends up being Constantine, where we end up getting a lot of the translation of the Bible, because it went into the Greek, and then it went into Latin, and then it went into the English, which I understand. With that, also some of the truth that I'm helping try to bring people comes out of some of those earlier revisions with, like, what they call the Peshitta, which was the original Aramaic. My weird YouTube is trying to focus on something weird behind me. I don't know what that is. Strange. And first, Maccabees 8. Now Judas heard of the fame of the Romans. They were very strong, and they were disposed towards all who made an alliance to them, that they pledged friendship to those who came to them. And they were very strong. He had been told of their wars and of their brave deeds they were doing among the Gauls, how they had defeated them and forced them to pay tribute, and what they had done in the land of Spain to get control of the silver and gold mines there, and how they had gained control of the whole region by planning patience, even though the place was a far distance from them. And they also subdued the kings who came against them from the ends of the earth, until they crushed them and inflicted great disaster on them. The rest paid them tribute every year, and they had crushed in battle and conquered Philip and the king of Persis and the Macedonians, who rose up against them. They had defeated Antiochus the Great, the king of Asia, who went to fight against them with 120 elephants and cavalry and chariots and a very large army. He was crushed by them and took them alive, and decreed that those who would reign after him should pay a heavy tribute and give hostages and surrender some of their best provinces. The countries of India, Media, and Lydia, these took from him and gave to King Eumenes. The Greeks planned to come and destroy them, but this became known to them, and they sent a general against the Greeks and attacked them. Many of them were wounded and fell, and the Romans took capture of their wives, and they plundered them, conquered their land, and tore down their strongholds, and enslaved them to this day. The remaining kingdoms and islands, as many as ever opposed them, they destroyed and enslaved. But their friends and those who they relied on them kept their friendship. They have subdued kings far and near, as many have heard their fame and feared them. Those whom they wish to plan and help and make kings, they make kings, and those whom they wish to dispose, and they had greatly exalted. Yet, for all this, not one of them has put a crown or worn a purple mark of pride, but they have built for themselves a senate chamber, and every day 320 senators constantly deliberated concerning the people to govern them well. They trust one man each year to rule them and to control their land, and they heed the one man, and there was no envy or jealousy among them. If you know your history, Rome was very strong at making as exactly as they said. They were very strong at finding how they could conquer, how they could make agreements with people, how they could set up and take over pretty much the whole world area there. And they were really good at conquering them. They were also the ones who set up the Senate system, which America runs on now, which we see that kind of coming apart and wrestling. Now it's definitely not like they said there that they all worked well with that. And we also in America trust one man to run the country, and that Senate is supposed to be behind them and guide them on how things are supposed to work here. So 17. So Judas chose Ephemius, the son of John of Achos, and Jason, the son of Eleazar, and sent him to Rome to establish a friendship and alliance, and to free themselves from the yoke. They saw that the kingdom of the Greek was enslaving Israel completely. They went to Rome, a very long journey, and entered the Senate chamber and spoke as follows. Judas, who is called Maccabees, and his brothers, and the people of the Jews, sent us to establish an alliance and peace with you, so that we may be enrolled as your allies and friends. The proposal pleased them, and this is the copy of the letter they wrote in reply, on bronze tablets, and sent to Jerusalem to remain with them as a memorial and peace alliance. May all go well with the Romans and the nations of the Jews, at sea and on land forever, and may the sword of the enemy be far from them. If war comes first to Rome, or any of their allies in their dominion, the nation of the Jews shall act as their allies wholeheartedly to the occasion, and may indicate to them to give to the enemy that makes war, that they shall not give or supply grain, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome decided, and they shall keep their obligations without receiving any in return. In the same way, if war comes first on the nations of the Jews, the Romans shall willingly act as their allies, as to the occasion may indicate to them, and to their enemies. They shall not be given grain, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome had decided, and they shall keep these obligations and do so without deceit. This on the terms the Romans made a treaty with the Jewish people. If after these terms are in effect, both parties shall determine to add or delete anything, they shall do so at their discretion, and any addition or deletion that they shall make shall be invalid or be valid. Hello, Charlie. Charlie came in to chat to see and says hello. I don't know how some of these people get the phone to act right when it's doing like that. Concerning the wrongs of the King Demetrius is doing to them, we have written to him as follows. Why have you made your yoke heavy on your friends and your allies the Jews? Now if they appeal again for help against you, we will defend for their rights and fight for you on the sea and the land. When Demetrius heard, chapter 9, when Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his armies had fallen in battle, he sent Baccharides and Amicius to the land of Judea a second time. and with them the right wing of the army. They went by the road that leads to Gilgal and encamped against Messiah and Abela. They took and killed many people. In the first month of the 152nd year, they encamped against Jerusalem, and they had marched off and went to Berea with 20,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry. Now Judas was encamped in Elasa. With him were 3,000 picked men, and when they saw a huge number of enemy forces, they were greatly frightened, and many slipped away from him in the camp, until there was no more than 800 of them left. When Judas saw that the army had slipped away and the battle was imminent, he was crushed in spirit, for he had no time to assemble them. He became faint, but he said to those that were left, "Let us get up and go against our enemies. We may have the strength to fight them." But they tried to dissuade him and say, "We do not have the strength. Let us save our lives now, and let us come back with our kindred and fight them. We are too few." But Judas said, Far be it from us to do such a thing as flee from them. If our time has come, let us die bravely for our kindred, and leave no cause to question our honor. If you stuck through any of the Maccabees or seen through that, Judas Maccabees was always one that stuck in and said, if God wants us to win, then he's going to let us win, no matter the size of the army, no matter theirs. And since through here, he's always had great success with that. And then the army of Baccharius marched out of the camp and took his stand for the encounter. The cavalry was divided into 2 companies, and the slingers and archers went ahead of the army, as did the chief warriors. Baccharides was on the right wing, flanked by the 2 companies, and the phalanx advanced to the sound of the trumpets, and the men with Judas blew their trumpets. The earth was shaken by the noise of the armies, and the battle raged from morning until evening. Judas saw that Baccharides and his strength of his armies were on the right, and that all the stout-hearted men went with him. They crushed the right wing, and he pursued them as far as the Mount Erosus. When those on the left wing saw the right wing was crushed, they turned and followed close behind Judas and his men. The battle became desperate, and many on both sides were wounded and fell. Judas also fell, and the rest fled. Then Jonathan and Simon took their brother Judas and buried him in the tomb of their ancestors in Modin, and wept for him. All Israel made great lamentation for him, and they mourned for many days, said, "How has the mighty have fallen, and the Savior of Israel?" Now the rest of the acts of Judas and his wars and the brave deeds that he did and his greatness had not been recorded, or had been recorded, but they were very many. After the death of Judas, and the renegades emerged of all parts of Israel, the wrongdoers reappeared. In those days a great famine occurred, and the country went over to their side. Baccharius chose the godless and put them in charge of the country. They made iniquity and searched for the friends of Judas and brought them to Baccharius, who took vengeance on them and made sport of them. So there is great distress in Israel. Such had not been seen since the time of the prophets had ceased to appear among them. Then all the friends of Judas assembled and said to Jonathan, "Since the death of your brother Judas, there has been no one like him to go against our enemies in Baccharius and to deal with those of our nation who hate us. Now, therefore, we have chosen you today to take his place as our ruler and leader to fight our battle." So Jonathan accepted his leadership, and at the time and the place of his brother Judas. When Baccharides learned of this, he tried to kill him, but Jonathan and his brother Simon and all who were with him heard of it and they fled into the wilderness of Teoka, encamped by the water of the pool of Aspar. Bachrides found out this on the Sabbath day, and with all his army crossed the Jordan. So Jonathan sent his brother as leader of the multitude and begged the Nabathians, who were his friends, for permission to store with them in a great amount of baggage they had. But the family of Jambi in Medeba came and seized John and all that he had and left with it. After these, it was reported to Jonathan and his brother Simon, the family of Jambi are celebrating a great wedding and conducting the bride, a daughter of one of the great nobles of Canaan, from Nadabath with an escort. Remember how their brother John had been killed and went up and hid under cover of the mountain. They looked out and saw a tumultuous progression with great amount of baggage, and the bridegroom came out of his friends and brothers to meet with them with tambourines and musicians and many weapons. When they rushed on them from the ambush and began killing them, many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled to the mountains, and the Jews took all of their goods. So the wedding was turned into mourning, and the voice of the musicians into a funeral dirge. After they had fully avenged the blood of their brother, they returned to the marshes of Jordan. When Bachrides heard of this, he came with a large force on the Sabbath day to the banks of Jordan. And Jonathan said to those with him, "Let us get up now and fight for our lives, for today things are not like they were before. For look, the battle is in front of us and behind us. The water of the Jordan is on this side, and on that, in the marsh and the thicket, there is no place to turn. Cry out now to heaven that you may be delivered from the hands of our enemies." So the battle began, and Jonathan stretched out his hand to strike Bachrides, but he eluded him and went to the rear. Then Jonathan and the men with him leapt into the Jordan and swam across to the other side, and the enemy did not cross the Jordan to attack them. And about 1,000 of Bachrides' men fell that day. And then Bachrides returned to Jerusalem and built strong cities in Judea, the fortress of Jericho, and Umanus, and Beth-horn, and Bethel, and Timnath, and Paraton, and Tipton, and the high walls, and gates, and bars. And he placed garrisons in them to harass Israel. He also fortified the town of Bethzur and Garzara, and the citadel in them, and put troops in stores of food. And he took the sons of the leading men into the land as hostages, put them under guard in the citadel at Jerusalem. In 153rd year, the second month, Alcimus gave orders to tear down the wall of the inner court of the sanctuary. He tore down the work of the prophets, but he only began to tear it down, for that time Alcimus was stricken and his work was hindered. His mouth was stopped and he was paralyzed, so that he could no longer say a word or give commands concerning his house. And Alcimus died at the time in great agony. When Bachrides saw that Alcimus was dead, he returned to the king in the land of Judea. Rest for 2 years. Then all the lawless plotted and said, "See, Jonathan and his men are living in quiet and confidence. So now let us bring Bachrides back, and he will capture them all in one night." And then they went and consoled with him. He started to come with a large force and secretly sent letters to all of his allies in Judea, telling them to seize Jonathan and his men. But they were unable to do it, because their plan became known. And Jonathan's men seized about 50 of the men of the country who were their leaders in this treachery, and killed them. Then Jonathan with his men and Simon withdrew to Bethbassi in the wilderness, and he rebuilt the parts of it that had been demolished, and they fortified it. When Baccharides learned of this, he assembled all his forces and sent orders to the men of Judea. Then he came and encamped against Bethbasi and fought against it for many days, and made machines of war. But Jonathan left his brother Simon in the town while he went into the country and went with only a few men. He struck down Odimra and his kindred and the prophets of Bethphasiron in their tents, and then he began to attack and went into battle with his forces. And Simon and his men sailed out from the town to set fire to the machines of war. They fought with Baccharides and was crushed by them. They pressed him very hard, for his plan and expedition had been in vain. So he was very angry at the renegades who had counseled him to come into the country, and he killed many of them and decided to go back to his own land. When Jonathan heard of this, he sent ambassadors to make peace with him and obtained release of the captives. He agreed, and he swore to Jonathan that he would not try to harm him as long as he lived. He restored to him the captives who had taken previously from the land of Judea, and then he turned and went back to his own land, and did not come again into their territory. Thus the sword ceased from Israel. Jonathan settled in Michmash and began to judge the people, and he destroyed the godless out of Israel. So, unfortunately, it sounds like Judas Maccabees died there, and Jonathan succeeded, took him over, and they fought for a while and ended up losing their fight to want to come in and attack Israel, especially since they had that king tried to take down the walls, and God put sickness on him, is what I got out of that, because he became ill, and then he ended up dying over it there. Next, we've got 10, which I will read later, which is going to be about Jonathan becoming the high priest. Thank you guys for visiting. Thank you for checking out the video. If you liked it, please like it and share with friends. Let everybody know. And God bless you. Have a great day.